We're going to be talking about Flexbox. Flexbox is a new layout mode that was introduced in CSS 3. In previous versions of CSS, we had 4 layout modes. We had block layout for laying out documents, we had inline layout for laying out text, we had tabular layout for laying out 2D tabular data, and we had positioned layout for explicit positioning. You could also argue that we had floats for layouts, but floats were actually never intended for layout purposes. In CSS 3, 2 new layout methods were introduced. The grid layout, which divides space into columns and rows, and like table layout, it works, but it's better. The grid layout spec is still being developed, so it isn't ready for use quite yet. But the Flexbox layout distributes space along a single column or a row. It's similar to float layouts, but it's better. The Flexbox spec is finished and enjoys excellent browser support today. If you visit the Can I Use website, you can see that all modern browsers, for the most part, support Flexbox. IE11 offers partial support. As you can see here, some of the bugs are still present with IE11. You can use vendor prefixes, though, to help with support. And if you want more information on this, I would invite you to visit the Can I Use website and search for Flexbox Layout. In this series of exercises, we're going to be looking at what we can accomplish using Flexbox. Here's a diagram that illustrates how Flexbox works. Flexbox lays items out in a single row or column. The Flexbox layout consists of a flex container. It holds the flex items. The flex container can be laid out horizontally or vertically. This is referred to as the main axes. The direct children of a flex container are laid out along the main axes. These children can flex their sizes and they can grow to fill unused space in a container, or they can shrink to avoid overflowing. You can nest multiple flex containers with different orientations, and you can achieve really complex layouts using this method. The Flexbox layout includes a set of intelligent default properties so that you can create powerful layouts with very little code. Here's an example of assigning the flex property to an item. This one line of code is going to identify the container as a flex container. It's going to identify all children of the flex container as flex items. Flex items are going to be laid out in a horizontal line. Flex items are going to be laid out in the source order that they appear in your HTML. Flex items are going to be laid out starting from the left side of the flex container to the right. And the flex items are going to be sized based on their regular width properties. If there isn't enough space for all the flexed items, then they're going to be allowed to shrink horizontally until they all fit. And if they need to shrink, each item is going to shrink equally. Flex items also are going to stretch vertically to match the height of the tallest flex item. I'll show you how all of these things work in the upcoming lectures. Let's jump into our code view so we can take a look at this. Here's the page that I've already created. As you can see, the HTML is fairly simple. I have a div with a class of wrapper that wraps around everything within the body. I have 3 main segments. I have the article with a class of main column. It has an H2 and 3 paragraphs. I have an aside with a class of sidebar 1. It has an H3 and a paragraph. And then I have another aside with a class of sidebar 2. It also has an H3 and a paragraph. If we look at this in the browser, my page currently looks like this. Here's the main column with sidebar 1 and sidebar 2. As you can see, I have a little bit of CSS formatting that I've already created. It's pretty basic stuff. I've just assigned the font family, the overall width. I've given the page a max width. I've set some margin settings. I've set padding and a line height. We're going to add some additional styles so we can take advantage of Flexbox. In order to take advantage of Flexbox, I really only need to do one thing. I'm going to add a display of flex to my wrapper. And if I save and we refresh in the browser, you can see what happens. Already, I'm getting a 3-column layout. So what's going to happen by just defining a display of flex is that each element that is a child of the flex parent is going to take up as much space as is available. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add some additional rules so we can kind of control how this layout looks. I'll start off by making a rule on main column. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify flex as being 1. I'm going to apply this rule to each column to make them all equal widths. So we'll make a rule on main column and set the flex to 1, and I'm going to make a rule for sidebar 1 and set the flex to 1, as well as doing the same thing on sidebar 2. If we save and we refresh, you're going to see that the page changes slightly. Now all of the columns are equal. What was happening before is the column that had more content, or more content that took up room, would take up as much room as it possibly could, and then the other contents would kind of fit in place. If we wanted the main column to be twice as big as the other two columns, well, all I have to do is I have to change the flex value to 2. This is going to allow it to be twice as big as the other columns. If we make this change and refresh in the browser, you can now see that the main column takes up twice as much space as sidebar 1 and sidebar 2. And we could continue to do this. If I set it to 3, it's going to take up 3 times as much space as sidebar 1 and sidebar 2. The other thing that you can do here is you can alter the order in which the elements are going to appear on the page. Normally, the elements are going to appear in the order in which they were declared within the HTML. So in my HTML, I declare the main column first, and then the sidebar 1, and then sidebar 2. And you can see that's how they show up. Main column, sidebar 1, sidebar 2. We'll go ahead and we'll add some additional order options. I'm going to have sidebar 1 have an order of 1. So it's going to be the first thing that's going to appear if we're talking right to left. I'll have main column take on a value of order 2, and sidebar 2 is going to have a value of order 3. If I save now, our page is going to display with sidebar 1 on the left, main column in the middle, and sidebar 2 on the right. As you can see, Flexbox is really easy, and you only have to add a tiny bit of code in order to take advantage of creating a multiple column layout. We'll look at some other things in some of the other upcoming movies as we progress through this section of our course.